The afternoon Atlanta sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the downtown office tower, bright and unforgiving. Alara Voss had spent the entire morning running errands, picking up dry cleaning, restocking the fridge, and finalizing the grocery run for the week, small, repetitive tasks that had defined her life for 8 years. After stepping down from her marketing career to support Kai's growing consulting firm, she'd turned their suburban home into a perfectly maintained sanctuary, believing stability and devotion would always be enough to hold her marriage together. She'd planned to drop by Kai's office with his favorite iced coffee and a homemade cookie, a tiny, routine gesture she'd made hundreds of times before. She'd texted him 30 minutes earlier to let him know she was on her way, but he'd left the message on read, no reply. It was normal for him to be swamped with client meetings, so she didn't overthink it. She signed in at the front desk, smiled at the receptionist who knew her well, and walked down the familiar hallway toward his private corner office, her sneakers quiet against the polished tile floor. The door was slightly ajar, cracked open just enough to let out soft, muffled sounds that froze her mid-step. It wasn't the sound of business calls or typing. It was laughter, light, breathless, feminine laughter tangled with Kai's low, teasing tone. Alara's fingers tightened around the paper coffee cup until her knuckles whitened. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that she was tired and over-imaginative, that Kai had always been faithful, always loyal. For 8 years, she'd trusted him blindly. Handed over joint account oversight, property management, and every major financial decision, convinced her husband's ambition and integrity were unshakable. She pushed the door open slowly. Without knocking, the scene unfolded in sharp, unblinking clarity. Kai was leaning back against his expensive oak desk, his suit jacket discarded over the chair back. A young woman Alara recognized from holiday party photos. Lila Marlowe, one of his junior coordinators, was standing between his legs, her hands resting lightly on his chest. Their faces were inches apart, and the intimate warmth between them was undeniable, thick enough to choke on. They pulled apart in startled shock the second the door creaked fully open, their guilty expressions freezing in place. Kai's eyes went wide with panic. Alara, wait, this isn't what it looks like. Lila stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushing red with embarrassment and guilt, her gaze darting everywhere but Alara's face. Alara said nothing. No gasp, no scream, no tearful accusation. She simply stood in the doorway, her chest tight with a cold, burning rage that settled deep in her bones. All the quiet sacrifices, the late nights waiting for him to come home, the financial control she'd surrendered, the dreams she'd put on hold for his career, every single thing crashed down on her in that single second. She didn't argue, didn't beg for an explanation, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. After 3 long, silent seconds, she turned on her heel and walked out. She closed the office door softly behind her, as if she'd just interrupted a casual work meeting, not destroyed the entire foundation of her marriage. She walked past the receptionist, through the lobby, and out into the bright afternoon sunlight. Her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. She got into her SUV, set the coffee cup in the cup holder, and pulled up the contact list on her phone. Her fingers moved fast, precise, no hesitation. She called the full-service moving company she'd used for their last home renovation, booked them for immediate same-day service, and gave them the address of her suburban marital home. She instructed them to remove every single item of furniture, every appliance, every piece of decor, every personal belonging, everything they'd accumulated together over 8 years of marriage. No exceptions, no leftovers. While the movers confirmed their arrival time, she texted Marnie, her best friend since college, "I saw Kai with his coworker. I'm emptying the house. I'm done waiting and compromising." Marnie's reply came within seconds, "Be careful legally. That's joint property. Don't act reckless." Alara stared at the warning words but didn't care. For 8 years, she'd been careful, patient, gentle, and compliant. Her carefulness had only gotten her betrayal and deception. Today, she was done being careful. She drove home slowly, watching the tree-lined suburban streets blur past the windshield. This house had been her whole world. She'd painted every wall, picked out every sofa, planted every flower in the backyard, organized every closet. She'd built a warm, perfect home for a man who'd been lying to her all along. By 5 o'clock that evening, the moving trucks pulled up in the driveway. The crew worked quickly and efficiently, hauling out couches, dining sets, bedroom furniture, kitchen appliances, rugs, paintings, even the small decorative trinkets they'd collected on vacation. Room by room, the warm, lived-in space turned cold and hollow. By sunset, the house was completely bare. No furniture, no photos, no trace of the life they'd built together. Only empty floors and quiet echoes remained. Alara locked the front door, slipped the key into her pocket, and drove to Marnie's apartment across town. She didn't cry once. Her grief had burned straight into cold, unyielding resolve. Later that night, her phone blew up with dozens of missed calls and frantic texts from Kai. His messages shifted from confused shock to furious anger. What did you do? Where is everything? Are you insane? Come home right now. Alara opened the chat window and stared at his words for a long time. For 8 years, she'd rushed to reassure him, to apologize for small mistakes, to fix every problem in their marriage. This time, she typed nothing back. She simply turned her phone face down and let him spiral. She knew this impulsive, drastic act had erased every normal part of their marriage overnight. There was no going back to quiet dinners, routine goodnight texts, or pretend happiness. The life she'd known was gone forever, and the real consequences of her retaliation were only just beginning to surface. Kai arrived home shortly after 9 that night, his black sedan rolling slowly down the quiet suburban street like he was still trying to process what had happened over text. He'd left the office early, cutting short urgent client calls, desperate to get back and fix whatever breakdown Alara had suffered. Up until he'd turned onto his block, he'd still managed to tell himself it was a dramatic overreaction, a temporary tantrum she'd calmed down from once he got home and apologized. But when he pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, the empty darkness of the house swallowed every last one of those excuses. Every window was black. No porch light, no living room lamp, no faint glow from the kitchen overhead that had burned every night for 8 years. The usually warm, welcoming silhouette of their single-family home looked hollow and abandoned, like a property waiting for new owners. Kai sat in the car for a full minute, staring at the front door. His chest tightening with a strange mix of rage and panic he'd never felt before. He grabbed his work bag, stormed up the walkway, and unlocked the front door. The second he stepped inside, silence crashed over him. No hum of the refrigerator, no soft rustle of curtains, no stack of throw pillows on the couch, no dining table covered with her weekly grocery lists. The floors echoed under his shoes. The walls were bare. Every cabinet stood wide open and empty. Even the bathroom towels, the shower curtains, the kitchen utensils Alara had collected for years, all of it was gone. Kai froze in the middle of the living room. His breath shallow and sharp. This was not anger. This was eradication. She hadn't just packed a bag and left. She had erased their entire life together. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out, fingers shaking. Lila's name lit up the screen. He hesitated for half a second before answering, his voice rough and unhinged. What happened? Lila asked softly, her tone careful and nervous. You left so abruptly. I've been worried. Kai stared at the empty hallway stretching out in front of him. Alara saw us. At the office. There was a quiet pause on the line. What's she going to do? She already did it, Kai snapped, spinning in a circle like he still couldn't believe the emptiness surrounding him. She moved every single thing out of this house. Everything. Furniture, appliances, clothes, even the stupid picture frames. There's nothing left. Lila's voice dropped to a quiet, cautious murmur. Kai, maybe she's just scared. Maybe you should talk to her calmly. Calm. The word made his blood boil. For years, he'd been calm. For years, he'd come home late, swallowed the quiet monotony of their marriage, tolerated the routine lifelessness Alara had settled into. He'd convinced himself he was being patient, being responsible, staying loyal to a marriage that had stopped growing a long time ago. And this was his reward, an empty house, public humiliation, and a wife who'd destroyed their entire life in a single afternoon. He ended the call without replying and immediately dialed Alara. The call went straight to voicemail. He dialed again. Same result. She'd blocked his number. Panic curdled into fury. He opened their family text thread and fired off message after message, his typing fast and furious, no longer trying to sound reasonable. You had no right to do this. That is joint property. You just ruined 8 years of our life over one stupid mistake. Come home immediately. We're going to talk like adults. This is insane. You're acting irrational and unstable. He waited 5 minutes. No reply. No read receipt. Nothing. Kai paced the bare living room floor, running a hand through his hair, his professional composure completely shattered. In the office, he was the calm, collected CEO who negotiated 6-figure contracts, who de-escalated client crises with ease. But here, in the hollow shell of his marriage, he was unmoored. He'd always believed he held the power in their relationship. He controlled the income, handled the investments, made every major decision. Alara had always been the soft, forgiving, accommodating one, the wife who stayed home, kept the peace, and waited for him. He'd never once considered she could fight back, desperate for answers. He pulled up Alara's social media, checked her location sharing, still active. Still showing she was somewhere in the city, not at home. He clicked on Marnie's profile next, instantly guessing where Alara was hiding. Rage flared hotter. Of course she'd run to Marnie. Marnie had always hated him, always whispered in Alara's ear that she deserved more. That she was wasting her potential playing housewife. Kai typed out a new text. Slower this time, shifting from anger to calculated emotional manipulation. I know you're hurt. I know I messed up. But don't destroy everything we built because of one moment of weakness. Our marriage wasn't perfect, Alara. You know that. We haven't been happy for a long time. He leaned against the empty wall, staring at the faint nail holes where their wedding photos had once hung. In his mind, he began rewriting the story, justifying his betrayal. He hadn't cheated because he was cruel. He'd cheated because he'd been lonely. Because Alara had stopped seeing him, stopped talking to him, stopped trying years ago. He was the victim here, 2 down across the city. In Marnie's modern downtown apartment, Alara sat on the leather sofa and read every single word. Marnie stood in the kitchen doorway, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water, her expression sharp and unimpressed. He's already pivoting. No apology, no accountability. Just blame shifting. He's trying to make his cheating your fault. Alara's fingers hovered over the screen, her heart cold. She could see it clearly now, the pattern she'd ignored for years. Every time Kai messed up, every time he was distant, every time he chose work over her, he softened the blow by reminding her the marriage was imperfect, that they were both unhappy, that she was equally responsible for the quiet decay between them. He thinks I'll cave, Alara said quietly. He thinks you're still the same wife who'll sit home and forgive him, Marnie corrected, setting a glass down beside her. But you already changed the game. Now he's scared. Before Alara could reply, her phone vibrated with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A polite, firm male voice spoke on the other end. Good evening, Ms. Voss. My name is Derek Hale. I'm legal counsel for Kai Voss. My client has retained my services to address the unauthorized removal of marital joint property. We are formally requesting you return all household assets immediately, or we will proceed with civil claims and formal police documentation. Alara's blood ran cold. Kai hadn't just texted threats. He'd already hired a lawyer. The soft illusion of possible reconciliation shattered completely. There was no more middle ground, no more gentle conversation, no more chance for him to apologize and fix things. He had chosen warfare before she'd even finished processing her own heartbreak. She ended the call and looked up at Marnie, her voice steady but edged with dawning fear. He's bringing legal action against me. Marnie's expression hardened instantly. Then we get you a lawyer first thing tomorrow. Alara, listen to me carefully, this just got real. What you did was emotionally justified, but legally risky. He's going to weaponize every single choice you made tonight. Alara stared out the high-rise window at the glittering Atlanta skyline, her mind racing. She'd acted on pure, unfiltered rage, convinced her retaliation would level the playing field. But now she realized the truth. Kai wasn't just fighting to get his furniture back. He was fighting to paint her as unstable, reckless, and destructive, so he could win the entire marriage, the assets, and the narrative. The chapter closed on her quiet, sinking realization. She had started the fight, but Kai was already preparing to win it. Chapter 3. Alara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she kept replaying the image of Kai and Lila pressed together behind his office desk, followed by the cold voice of Kai's lawyer echoing inside her head. By 6:30 in the morning, she was fully awake. Sitting cross-legged on Marnie's living room carpet, spreading piles of old bank statements, tax documents, and household bills across the floor. Marnie wandered out from the bedroom with 2 mugs of hot coffee. I called Robin Torres first thing. She can see us at 10 o'clock. She's one of the sharpest family law attorneys in the metro area. She set a mug down beside Alara and glanced over the scattered paperwork. Digging through the financial history? I need to know exactly what belongs to me, Alara replied, her fingers flipping through printed bank records. For 8 years I let Kai manage almost everything. I signed tax forms without reading every line. I trusted him to handle our savings, our investments, the mortgage. I never sat down and tracked it all myself. As she sorted through statements, a disturbing pattern started to emerge. Their joint checking account had steady incoming deposits from Kai's consulting firm. But regular, moderately sized withdrawals kept appearing. Transfers going to accounts whose names Alara did not recognize. At the time, Kai had told her those were business-related expenses for client contracts. She had never questioned it. Now doubt not at her. Robin's office was located in a quiet professional building not far from downtown Atlanta. When they walked in, the attorney greeted them calmly, no dramatic tone, no oversympathetic pity. She listened carefully as Alara told the whole story, the office discovery, hiring movers, emptying the marital home, the threatening legal letter from Kai's lawyer. Robin leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Emotionally, I get exactly why you did it. Legally? This is risky. Most of those household items are marital joint property. Taking all of them without mutual consent gives your husband strong ammunition. He can argue conversion of assets. That does not mean you will automatically lose, but we cannot treat this as some kind of complete victory. Alara's throat tightened. So I made a huge mistake. You made an understandable mistake, Robin corrected. Now we play defense and gather our own evidence. We push back against his threats. But we are not returning every single item unconditionally. If he wants those belongings back, he will need to negotiate asset division as part of formal divorce proceedings. Do not hand him leverage for free. On the drive back toward Marnie's apartment, Alara's phone pinged repeatedly. She opened her banking app, and her stomach dropped. Kai had frozen their joint checking and joint savings accounts. Every shared fund they owned was locked. She could view the balances, but she could not withdraw a single dollar. Marnie glanced over at her screen. He cut off your access completely. He knows you don't have much separate personal cash to fall back on. This is pressure tactics. He is hoping financial stress will force you to cave quickly. Alara thought about her small individual savings account, left over from her old marketing job before marriage. It was barely enough to cover rent for a couple of months, nowhere near enough to sustain a long legal fight. Kai's business brought in substantial six-figure income. He could afford endless lawyer hours while she scraped by. That afternoon, Kai sent another message through Robin, relaying his formal offer: return all household possessions within 48 hours. In exchange, he would temporarily unfreeze one joint account so she could access limited money. No mention of discussing infidelity. No talk of fair property split. Just get back what you took, and I will ease your financial pain. Alara sat on the couch and stared at the message for a long while. Part of her wanted to yield. The weight of money stress was real. But she remembered the office, remembered years of handing over control. Remembered how every time she compromised before, it only left her with more to lose. She dictated her reply through Robin. She would not return property under duress. Any resolution would happen only inside official divorce negotiation. Minutes after Robin sent that response, Alara watched on her phone as Kai transferred the last small available amount out of their remaining accessible joint fund. He was sending her a clear warning. He was fully willing to leave her financially stranded to get what he wanted. Even Marnie looked troubled. He is prepared to make this hurt. Alara folded up all her financial papers, her jaw set hard. She had expected screaming fights and emotional manipulation. She had not fully prepared for just how ruthless the financial warfare would become. Night fell again. Outside the window, Atlanta city lights glittered. Alara understood now. This was no longer just about hurt feelings or revenge for betrayal. Kai was fighting to make her pay for standing up to him. And the worst part was, he held most of the money power. Her phone lit up once more. A forwarded bank document attachment popped in from Robin. Hidden inside the files were more unexplained payments, transactions stretching far further back than she had suspected. The trail suggested money had been flowing out long before Lila ever worked at the company. Alara's heart sank. The affair and the secret spending might have begun much earlier than she imagined. She had only scratched the surface of all the lies. The financial freeze settled over Alara like a heavy, unshakable weight. By mid-morning the next day, every shared card, every automatic bill pay, every small financial safety net she'd relied on for 8 years was completely disabled. She could no longer gas up her SUV, cover her phone bill, or even grab groceries without dipping into her tiny personal savings, funds she'd hoarded long before marriage. Funds she'd always refused to touch out of quiet loyalty to their shared life. What stung most was the deliberate cruelty of it. Kai wasn't just protecting his assets. He was punishing her for daring to disrupt the perfect, convenient life he'd built for himself. One where he got stability at home and secrecy elsewhere. Alara spent the morning buried in old bank records, cross-referencing the unexplained transfers Robin had flagged. The more she traced the numbers, the clearer the pattern became. Small, consistent withdrawals, coded as business expenses, draining their joint accounts month after month, long before Lila had ever been hired at the firm. She'd been right to suspect the lies stretched further back than the office encounter. What she still couldn't figure out was exactly where the money had gone, and who else Kai had been hiding from her. Frustration curdled into reckless anger. For years, she'd been the reasonable one, the calm partner, the person who smoothed over conflict and avoided confrontation to keep the household peaceful. That strategy had gotten her nothing but deception and financial vulnerability. Tired of waiting for lawyers and legal slow play, tired of letting Kai control every angle of the fight, Alara made an impulsive decision. She pulled up Lila Marlowe's social media profile, found the direct message button, and typed a sharp, unfiltered warning. You know Kai is married. You know he's destroying my life to protect his reputation. Whatever he's promised you, it's temporary. He will never choose you over the life he's built. Stop letting yourself be used to ruin someone's family. She sent it before Marnie could talk her down, before she could overanalyze the consequences. In the moment, it felt like reclaiming a sliver of power, speaking the truth out loud instead of sitting silently while two people dismantled her marriage, but the backlash arrived within hours. Swift and brutal. Lila did not reply with guilt or hesitation. Instead, she screenshot the entire message. deleted Alara's account interaction, and forwarded the evidence straight to Kai. By afternoon, Kai had the screenshots saved, compiled, and ready to weaponize. He didn't just send them to his lawyer, he sent them to every mutual friend, every couple they'd socialized with for years, every family acquaintance who'd ever praised their perfect marriage. He framed it carefully, painting himself as the victim of an unhinged, vengeful spouse. He texted group threads and individual contacts a polished, sorrowful narrative. Alara had spiraled emotionally after a minor marital disagreement, emptied the family home out of spite, and was now harassing a young employee with threatening messages. He omitted every detail of the office encounter, every year of secrecy, every hidden transfer. He presented Lila as an innocent bystander caught in his wife's irrational breakdown. The whispers started fast. Mutual friends began texting Marnie, confused and concerned, asking if Alara was really struggling with her mental health. Old acquaintances stopped replying to Alara's messages entirely. The quiet, respectable social life she'd nurtured for nearly a decade crumbled in a single afternoon. Marnie found Alara staring blankly at her muted phone notifications, her shoulders rigid with defeat. "You shouldn't have messaged her," Marnie said, her tone firm but not unkind. "I get why you did it." But it gave him exactly the ammunition he needed to flip the story. Alara's voice was tight. "I was supposed to just sit back and let them win? Let him freeze my money, ruin my security, and carry on like he's the good guy? No, Marnie replied. But you fight legally, not emotionally. You fight with evidence, not texts. Every impulsive move you make right now gets turned into proof that you're unstable in court." The disagreement hung thick between them, a rare crack in their unshakable friendship. Marnie was still on her side, still willing to help, but she refused to justify Alara's recklessness. For the first time since the betrayal, Alara felt truly alone, cut off from her social circle, financially crippled, and now quietly distanced from the only person who'd ever had her back. Kai capitalized on the division instantly. He sent a new settlement offer through his lawyer, one designed to exploit her isolation and dwindling resources. He would unfreeze a portion of her funds only if she signed a preliminary statement admitting her aggressive and destructive behavior, and returned every household item within 3 days. The fine print stripped her of any future claim to spousal support and weakened her potential asset division rights. Alara refused immediately, but the pressure was mounting. Her personal savings were dwindling. The social judgment stung sharper than she'd expected. The longer the conflict dragged on, the more the world seemed to believe Kai's polished lies. Late that night, while scrolling through old cloud files in a desperate search for more financial proof, Alara stumbled on a buried folder she'd never noticed before, archived email threads dating back 3 full years. Curious, she opened them, and her blood turned cold. The emails were between Kai and Lila, long before Lila had ever been promoted to his direct staff. Flirtatious, intimate, layered with secret plans and private meetings. The affair hadn't started months ago, as she'd suspected. It had started 3 years prior. 3 years of secret dates, 3 years of hidden communication. 3 years of Kai coming home to her every night, smiling, kissing her forehead, and lying straight to her face. Worse, buried in the email signatures and attached receipts were references to rental payments, restaurant tabs, and hotel charges, expenses matching the exact business withdrawals she'd been tracing from their joint accounts. Alara sat frozen in the dim lamplight, the weight of 3 years of unknown betrayal crashing over her. Her impulsive text to Lila was no longer a moment of petty revenge. It was the smallest, weakest reaction to a lifetime of quiet deception she'd never fully seen, but the realization came too late to fix the damage. Kai already controlled the social narrative, the legal playing field, and nearly all their shared money. Her one desperate attempt to reclaim power had only pushed her further into isolation, and exposed that every truth she'd uncovered so far was just the beginning of a far larger, far more painful lie. The dawnlight seeped through Marnie's apartment window soft and gray, but Alara never closed her eyes. She spent the entire night scrolling through the archived email threads, her fingers shaking against the screen as she pieced together 3 years of stolen moments and calculated deceit. Every message chipped away at the gentle, trusting version of her marriage she'd clung to for so long. Kai hadn't just slipped up once in a moment of weakness. He'd lived a double life methodically, patiently, right under her roof. The emails revealed a pattern far more insidious than casual infidelity. Lila had started as a temporary administrative contractor at the firm, quiet and easily overlooked, and Kai had begun grooming her within months of her hire. They'd kept their relationship strictly off company channels at first, communicating through personal emails and encrypted texts, meeting for lunch dates, late-night drives, and weekend getaways Alara had never questioned. Kai had always told her those weekends were out-of-town client retreats, mandatory work obligations she'd never needed to verify. What haunted Alara most were the small, intimate details buried in the threads. Lila wrote about Kai complaining of his boring, stagnant home life, of a wife who no longer understood him, of a marriage he claimed had died long before Lila ever entered the picture. Kai had painted Alara as the cold, unfeeling barrier standing between him and happiness, turning his affair into a sympathetic escape rather than selfish betrayal. He'd twisted the truth so thoroughly that even Lila believed she was saving him, not destroying a family. Alara finally understood why so many of their joint account withdrawals had never lined up with real business records. Every unexplained transfer, every vague client expense, every cash withdrawal Kai had shielded behind work jargon had funded his secret life. He'd used their shared future, the money they'd saved for home repairs, emergencies, and long-term security, to wine and dine his mistress, to book hotel rooms, to rent a private downtown studio where they could meet away from prying eyes. She compiled screenshots, sorted receipt attachments, and cross-referenced every date with the bank statements she'd spent days organizing. Piece by piece, she built a solid timeline of fraud and deception, one that stretched back 3 full years. The deeper she dug, the more she realized how much she'd sacrificed in blindness. While she'd been at home renovating their bathrooms, planting backyard gardens, and budgeting meticulously to stretch their shared income, Kai had been draining their assets to sustain his secret relationship. When Marnie woke hours later, she found Alara seated on the floor, surrounded by open laptop tabs and printed evidence sheets. Her face hollow and drained. "It's 3 years, Alara said hoarsely, no preamble, no emotion left in her voice. He's been lying to me for 3 entire years. All the work trips, all the late nights, all the mysterious expenses. None of it was work." Marnie knelt beside her, scanning the email excerpts, her expression hardening with every line she read. "This isn't just infidelity, Alara. This is financial dissipation. He's wasted marital assets on a third party for years. This completely flips the legal playing field." Before they could process the full weight of the evidence, Alara's phone rang with Robin's number. She answered immediately, expecting the attorney to discuss next steps for their defense. Instead, Robin's tone was grave, urgent, and unyielding. "We have an active filing," Robin said bluntly. "Kai's attorney submitted a formal divorce petition first thing this morning. He's listed irreconcilable differences as the cause. But the primary supporting claim is your alleged willful destruction and conversion of marital property. He's framing your decision to empty the house as premeditated financial sabotage." Alara's breath caught in her throat. "He's filing first? After everything he's done?" "He's racing to set the official court narrative," Robin explained. "Whoever files first controls the initial framing of the case. Right now, on paper, he's the aggrieved party. He's claiming you acted out of retaliatory malice, that you've endangered his business reputation, and that your emotional instability makes you unfit for equitable asset division." Rage and helplessness crashed over Alara in equal measure. Kai had spent years stealing from their marriage, lying to her face, and breaking every vow they'd made, yet he was the one rushing to court to paint her as the villain. Her one impulsive act of self-defense had become his most powerful weapon. "But we have proof," Alara said, gripping her laptop tightly. "We have emails, receipts, a 3-year timeline of him wasting our money on Lila. That proves his entire case is built on lies." "It proves counter-misconduct," Robin corrected, calm and pragmatic. "But the court doesn't operate on moral fairness. It operates on official filings and precedent. His claim is already in the system. Our evidence can destroy his credibility, but we have to file our response fast, or his version of events sticks." Alara stared at the screen, at the years of lies laid bare before her eyes, and felt her last shred of hope for a peaceful resolution shatter completely. She'd spent weeks believing this fight was about a single office betrayal, about one terrible moment of cheating. Now she knew the truth. Her marriage had never been a loving partnership. It had been a carefully constructed facade, built on Kai's endless deception, financial exploitation, and emotional manipulation. Marnie placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We can fight this. This evidence dismantles every lie he's told to friends, to lawyers, and to the court." "But Alara, this is no longer a simple breakup. This is a full legal war, and he's already one step ahead." Alara closed her laptop, her resolve hardening into something colder and sharper than the reckless anger she'd felt before. She was no longer fighting just to recover her belongings or restore her dignity. She was fighting to expose 3 years of hidden fraud, to reclaim the assets he'd stolen from their marriage, and to stop him from rewriting history to make her the villain of his own failures. But as she processed Robin's warning, a terrifying truth settled in. Kai had already won the first legal battle. He'd set the story in motion, filed the official paperwork, and positioned himself as the victim. For the first time since uncovering the affair, Alara realized she wasn't just facing a cheating husband, she was facing a ruthless, calculated opponent who'd been planning his escape from the marriage far longer than she'd ever suspected. The formal divorce filing landed heavy over Alara's entire world. Overnight, the quiet, private heartbreak of a broken marriage turned into a public, court-documented battle with real stakes, real deadlines, and a legal narrative that already favored Kai. Every move she'd made out of raw, wounded instinct was now bullet-point evidence against her in an official state filing. Robin's office sent over the full petition first thing in the morning, and the words blared off the screen: willful destruction of marital property, emotional instability, retaliatory conduct. Kai had successfully framed her as the disordered force that destroyed their marriage. While his 3 years of deliberate cheating and financial fraud remained unmentioned, hidden in the gaps of his one-sided story, the pressure collided from every direction at once. Financially, her tiny personal savings were rapidly dwindling, stretched thin, covering temporary rent, fuel, and basic groceries. No joint accounts, no backup cards, no safety nets remained. Socially, the whispered judgments continued to spread. Mutual friends who'd once congratulated them on their stable, successful marriage now treaded carefully around Alara, unsure which version of the story to believe. Many chose the easiest path, siding with the man who still occupied polite society's favorable light. The man with the thriving business and calm, curated public persona. Even Marnie could no longer offer unreserved encouragement. Sitting across from Alara at the kitchen table, scrolling through the court documents, her best friend's tone was honest, unflinching, and sober. "I'm still with you," Marnie said firmly. "But I can't pretend your choices didn't hand him the upper hand. Legally, he's right, you did remove joint property without consent. Morally, you had every reason to burn it all down. But courts don't care about moral reason. They care about paperwork, precedent, and who appears reasonable on record." Alara nodded, exhausted down to her bones. She understood. For the first time since walking in on that office scene, she didn't have anger to fuel her. She had only weight, the weight of 3 years of hidden lies, the weight of her own impulsive mistakes, the weight of a fight she was now forced to survive instead of simply win. Kai, by contrast, appeared completely in control. Emboldened by his first strike legal filing, he grew bolder, more confident in his position. He stopped sending frantic, angry texts. Instead, he sent calm, detached updates through his lawyer, each one designed to chip away at Alara's resolve. He proposed limited, conditional fund unfreezes, offered minor compromises on household items, and continued to paint himself as the reasonable, forgiving party forced into divorce by his wife's volatility. Privately, though, his overconfidence began to crack. Secure in his legal advantage, he stopped covering his tracks as carefully. Unaware Alara now possessed archived email evidence spanning 3 years, he grew sloppy with his financial trail, making rushed business transfers, mixing personal and marital spending, and leaving small but critical gaps in his fabricated expense reports. Robin picked up on those inconsistencies instantly during their case review. "He's overplaying his hand," she told Alara over a midday call. "He thinks this case is locked in his favor, so he's not bothering to clean up his old financial lies. That's our opening. But right now, you're still on the defensive. We need to weather this pressure long enough to flip the narrative." Weathering the pressure meant enduring wave after wave of small defeats. Alara scrolled through old family photos late that night, seeing the staged happiness, the weekend trips, the holiday dinners, every moment Kai had lived while lying through his teeth. She grieved not just the marriage, but the years of herself she'd invested in a partnership that had never truly existed. She'd sacrificed career growth, financial independence, and personal ambition to build a life for someone who'd spent every spare moment dismantling it in secret. For hours, she sank into a quiet rock bottom. She questioned every choice, every compromise, every time she'd chosen trust over verification, kindness over self-protection. She wondered if she would lose everything: her fair share of assets, her reputation, her ability to rebuild a stable life after the damage that it was in that lowest, most vulnerable state that her phone rang with an unknown number again. Expecting another legal notice or a spam call, she almost declined. Something hesitant and quiet on the caller ID made her pause. She answered, lifting the phone slowly to her ear. "Alara?" It was Lila. The voice was shaky, unconfident, stripped of the soft flirtatiousness Alara had only ever imagined. It sounded young, tired, and uncertain, the voice of someone who had also just realized they'd been lied to. "I need to talk to you," Lila said quickly, before Alara could hang up. "Not to fight. Not to defend him. I found things. I found out the truth. Can we meet? Somewhere public, neutral. I won't cause trouble. I swear." Alara froze, her heart lifting not with hope, but with sharp, alert clarity. This was the crack in Kai's armor she had been waiting for. The rival he'd thought was his greatest weapon was now unraveling from the inside. After a long beat of silence, Alara answered, her voice steady and unyielding. "Tell me where." Alara chose a sunlit neighborhood coffee shop 20 minutes from downtown, a quiet, crowded space with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough foot traffic to keep the meeting honest and unthreatening. She arrived 10 minutes early, dressed simply, no makeup, no attempt to compose a perfect front. After months of fighting, of hiding her cracks to survive judgment, she was done performing. She sat at a corner table with a cold water glass, her laptop closed in her bag, and waited for Lila. Her mind calm for the first time since walking in on Kai's office betrayal. When Lila stepped through the glass entrance, Alara barely recognized her. The polished, put-together office coordinator was gone. Her hair was messy, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted, her shoulders hunched like she'd been carrying a weight she could no longer bear. She hesitated at the door, scanning the room until she locked eyes with Alara, then walked slowly over. Sliding into the chair across the table with none of the confidence she'd once carried. "I'm sorry," Lila said immediately, her voice cracking before she even sat fully upright. "I had no idea. None of it was what he told me." Alara studied her quietly, no anger, no malice, only exhausted clarity. "Tell me everything." Over the next hour, Lila unraveled Kai's entire parallel narrative, the one he'd sold her for 3 years. He'd told her his marriage was loveless, that he and Alara slept in separate rooms, that they'd stayed married only for financial convenience and social appearance. He'd promised Lila steady commitment, a future, a real family. He'd sworn he was weeks away from filing for divorce dozens of times, always pushing the date forward, always finding a new excuse to delay. Lila had believed every word, convinced she was the quiet, patient love waiting for him to escape an unhappy marriage, not the other woman destroying a loyal partner's life. Worse, Lila confirmed the financial trail Alara had only suspected. Kai had used company bonuses, fake client stipends, and joint marital funds to fund their secret dates, weekend trips, and private rental space. He'd asked Lila to keep quiet about cash payments and off-the-books transfers, framing it as temporary secrecy to protect his business reputation. He'd lied to both of them, stringing 2 separate lives along for years, selfishly refusing to lose the stability of his marriage or the thrill of his affair. "I found old texts last night," Lila admitted, her throat tight with shame. Texts to other women, old promises he broke, messages where he laughed about how easy it was to keep you stable at home while he lived freely. "He never loved me. He just loved having someone who'd listen to him, who'd worship him, who wouldn't challenge him." Alara absorbed every word without flinching. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Kai hadn't cheated because their marriage failed. He'd failed their marriage because he was greedy, dishonest, and incapable of honoring commitment. Every excuse, every shifted blame, every manipulated narrative had been a lie to cover his own selfish choices. Lila slid a folder across the table, filled with screenshots, hidden chat logs, and unreported transaction confirmations. "This is everything I have. I'm done covering for him. I quit my job this morning. I'm moving out of the city. I needed you to know the truth." Alara nodded, accepting the folder without triumph. "Thank you." The meeting ended quietly, no drama, no confrontation. Lila left first, disappearing down the sidewalk, free at last from Kai's manipulation. For the first time in 3 years, Kai had no one left to lie for him. No one to prop up his perfect public facade. Alara returned to Marnie's apartment and handed the full cache of evidence to Robin. Combined with the 3 years of archived emails and financial discrepancies she'd already compiled, Lila's testimony and records completed an ironclad case. Kai's entire legal narrative crumbled instantly. The man who'd painted Alara as unstable, destructive, and unreasonable was now exposed as a serial liar, a financial exploiter, and a manipulator who'd built his double life on years of calculated deceit. Robin filed the formal response with the court that same afternoon, including the full timeline of infidelity, fraudulent asset dissipation, and witness corroboration. She also submitted a motion to dismiss Kai's core claim of property destruction, arguing his long-term financial misconduct far outweighed Alara's single impulsive retaliation, and that his deliberate deception had been the true cause of the marriage's collapse. Kai's confidence shattered overnight. He texted Alara repeatedly, begging for negotiation, pleading for mercy, suddenly willing to compromise on assets, on settlements, on everything he'd previously refused to concede. He tried emotional manipulation again, apologizing profusely, claiming remorse, promising to change, desperate to avoid public court exposure and reputational ruin. Alara never replied. 2 weeks later, they attended mandatory divorce mediation, sitting across a sterile conference table from each other for the first time since the office betrayal. Kai arrived defensive and desperate, his polished composure gone, his business calm demeanor replaced by anxiety and frustration. He attempted to revisit his old narrative, blaming marital strife, blaming miscommunication, blaming Alara's reaction for ruining everything. Alara let Robin lay out the full, unfiltered truth. The 3-year affair. The stolen marital funds. The fabricated business expenses. The dual manipulation of both women. The complete, calculated fraud at the center of their marriage. Faced with irrefutable evidence and witness testimony, Kai had no defense left. His legal case collapsed entirely. The mediator ruled in favor of equitable asset division, stripping Kai of the unfair advantage he'd tried to seize. Alara retained her right to half the marital estate, partial spousal support, and full clearance from his false allegations of property sabotage. The court acknowledged her impulsive choice to empty the house but ruled it a justified emotional response to prolonged betrayal, not malicious destruction, erasing the toxic narrative Kai had weaponized to ruin her reputation. In the final settlement, Alara paid a small, reasonable concession for the moved household property, a minor financial penalty that closed the legal loop entirely. It was a cost she chose willingly, a final line drawn under her old life. She did not walk away with 0 losses, but she walked away with truth, dignity, and full control of her future. Months later, Alara settled into a small, bright townhouse in a quiet Atlanta suburb, a space she rented entirely on her own terms. She relaunched her freelance marketing business, rebuilding her career slowly, steadily, without sacrificing her independence for anyone. She rebuilt her savings, reclaimed her financial literacy, and learned to prioritize her own security over blind trust. She was not the same woman who'd once devoted every part of her life to building a home for someone who'd never deserved her. She was softer in kindness, harder in boundaries, wiser in love and trust. She no longer feared loneliness or starting over. She understood now that true stability never came from a marriage, a house, or another person's loyalty. It came from self-respect, financial awareness, and the courage to act for herself instead of waiting for someone else to change. Kai's reputation never fully recovered. The quiet fallout of his exposed deceit spread through his professional circles, damaging his client relationships and stunting his business growth. He lost the perfect family image he clung to, the stable home he'd taken for granted, and the easy control he'd once held over every part of his life. He was left with nothing but the empty freedom he'd chased for years, and the quiet regret of losing a loyal, loving life to temporary selfish desire. On a quiet evening, Alara sat on her new backyard patio, watching the sunset paint the sky soft gold, and thought back to the day she'd emptied her marital home. It had been an impulsive, reckless act born from broken trust and searing heartbreak. But it had also been the moment she stopped waiting for apologies, stopped begging for loyalty, stopped letting someone else hold power over her life. She had lost her marriage, but she had found herself. There were no perfect endings, no grand victories, no easy forgiveness. But there was closure. There was growth. There was a new, unshakable peace, the quiet, powerful freedom of knowing she would never again let blind trust cost her everything.